time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, here on a Tuesday, where breaking recruiting news here on Sports Talk leads off the show.
Oh, okay.
As South Carolina has gained a commitment for the 2020 class.
Wait, don't share anything if it's behind a paywall now.
Is this behind a paywall?
I don't know if
are we allowed
to report news?
I don't know.
Are we allowed to report news that happens?
Apparently, certain people and certain organizations feel like they own the news.
Are we allowed, like, if we come across something that's behind something that we pay for, to share it with people? Because that's the way journalism
I'd have to run
works.
that through Stalin to see if he approves of it.
Yeah,
I'm not sure in a free society if you're able to repeat.
Ask Putin. Maybe he.
Unbelievable.
In case of emergency, break glass.
Inside joke for those of you who haven't been paying attention today.
To Twitter.
Luke Doty from Myrtle Beach, quarterback, commits to USC. He just announced it a few minutes ago on his Twitter page. So that's a huge pickup for the Gamecocks. This is a young man who is a really good athlete. He, at Myrtle Beach High School, has been a backup quarterback for 3 years. They had a 3-year starter, and he would play some quarterback, but he played receiver and did other things because he's that kind of an athlete. And now people knew about him since the 9th grade year, saw him in 7-on-7 leagues, saw him in camps, knew he was a very good athlete and a good player. And now he'll be the quarterback at Myrtle Beach the next couple of years. And he made a visit to USC Monday and made his commitment today to the Gamecocks.
Yeah, Lawson Cribb was the guy who was the starter there originally, and he was in the class of 2018, didn't really get much interest from anybody. But, you know, this is something where, you know, you had made the mention about the fact that he had drawn some USC and Clemson interest, although USC had gone in a little bit harder. Clemson has more set their sights for 2020 on DJ Uiagalelei. He's gotten, obviously, a lot more of the Clemson attention. But this is something where, you know, we talk a lot about the closing of the borders when it comes to South Carolina, especially with the Gamecocks, just because if you have good in-state talent, you're fighting off Clemson for it and trying to get that in. That's very important to get. Granted, you know, with what you have with Jake Bentley, with what you have coming in with Ryan Helinski, with what you have, of course, now with Doty, Carolina's got some quarterback talent now. And I think that, you know, if you get this guy, you can keep this guy. I know that it's very, very early, you know, when it comes to the 2020 class. You know, we're a year and a half away. But at the same time, you look at that and you say, oh, my goodness, that's a big, big piece for South Carolina. And maybe much like Helinski, he can get some other guys to come forward as well.
Well, you got to build your depth, and you got to build your quality depth. So if you're South Carolina and you've got Jake Bentley now, who was a highly recruited quarterback. You got Helinski coming in, who was a highly recruited quarterback. And now you got De'Carrion Joyner. Yeah, can't forget about him. Was a highly recruited quarterback. And now you've got Luke Doty. All of a sudden, you're going to have a quarterback situation kind of like they have at Clemson, where there just wasn't enough room for everybody, and people started going other places because they kept recruiting better and better quarterbacks.
Well, am I the only one? But I actually see some talent in Urick. I know he's thin as a rail, but
next you're going to tell me Scarnecchia.
No, that kid can move, though. You can tell he can run. When he
But can he throw, though?
Well, the thing about it is, one of the things he can do, not only can he run, but he can see over everybody too, because he's about 6'4".
Right. His problem is that he is a prisoner of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think he, if given an opportunity to play somewhere, maybe not a South Carolina, maybe a mid to level Power 5, maybe he could make a roster and make a starting job. But in the case of Urick, you have Bentley, who's an established starter. You have De'Carrion Joyner, who many believe can at least hold some sort of spot on this team, and the guys who are waiting in the wings and recruiting. Well, in my mind, there's just not a spot for him.
Joyner might be the loser in this whole thing. We're going to have to wait and see how things play out down the road. And I know he is adamant about being a college quarterback.
Right.
But he he doesn't come in as the pure quarterback like Helinski is and like Doty is and will be. I mean, he was a great athlete at Fort Dorchester who made just a ton of plays just off of pure athleticism. But if you look at him, I mean, he doesn't have the throwing motion and ability that some of these guys have right now, but he does have other intangibles. And, if he loves USC and if he loves playing for Will Muschamp, and he can open up his eyes to the fact that, I can go and make money in a couple of years in the NFL as a safety or as a wide receiver, it might behoove him to consider that in another year or so if these other guys come in and are as good as they appear to be.
I just can tell you, he looked incredibly raw in the spring game. And again, I know that's all we get to see. And, we say the same thing about, what Kelly Bryant looked like in the Clemson spring game. He didn't have a good spring game, and all the coaches will say, well, that's not indicative of the way he played all spring. And the same things are being said about the Kerryon Jr. for South Carolina. But just in my mind, it's hard to think of him kind of in the same light as, or hard to not think of him in the same light as almost kind of like where Hunter Johnson was at Clemson, where a highly touted guy, somebody who comes in with a lot of hype around him, but then a guy who comes in behind him has a little bit more hype.
But it's something to be said when you see guys like Connor Shaw and Savell Newton, maybe not the purest throwers, but those chains move because once they come out of the pocket, they get the first down.
Well,
Connor Shaw was very dangerous at converting on third downs, not only with his arm, but with his legs.
Sometimes it's a curse to have too much talent. It's a it's a curse to be able to do too many things good, but maybe not one thing great.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
I see what
in the case of Savell Newton, in the case of Corey Jenkins, Corey Jenkins played quarterback at South Carolina, ended up playing linebacker in the NFL for several years. Had he played linebacker strictly at South Carolina, though he was a good quarterback, had he been a linebacker, he'd have been an all-SEC linebacker.
I was laughing more because I thought you were speaking more broadly about South Carolina's quarterback situation. This is a problem that they are more than willing to try and negotiate. This is not a problem per se. This is what they've had in the quarterback room for the last couple of years has been a problem. There has been not that there needs to be, but there's been no threat on Jake Bentley's position. Jake Bentley has been the solid starter for the last 2 years, and there really has been no reason to think otherwise. Now, you at least have built up, like you said, the depth. Whether he stays beyond this year or comes into his senior year as the starter again, there'll be some pressure. There'll be some heat, which I think is a good thing and makes people play better.
All right, 800-956-7266. Reaction to Luke Doty's commitment to South Carolina as the Gamecocks strike in state for a young quarterback, their 2020 quarterback in the class now. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. And, of course, tomorrow we get a chance to go see the new operations building over at USC, see how that has come along, maybe throw in a suggestion or two to the builders on what they can do to improve it or add to it, maybe throw a nap room in there, maybe a sauna, maybe like a cafeteria.
Slide. Can they get a slide?
That idea has already been used.
Yeah.
But they could do the pole. Clemson's got the slide. They can do the fireman's pole from one floor to the next if they wanted to have something like that.
Be careful talking about poles around here when it comes to.
Well, that's a good point.
The only suggestion I would make is if a fan wants to see the operations, at least have a paywall there so I can put money in and enter the building.
Are you allowed in if you put your $5 in?
Yeah.
This has got to be the snarkiest opening segment.
I don't like to leave people in the dark, but basically what we're talking about here is the Big Spur today had this humongous, earth-shattering story that a USC recruit did not qualify.
Taekwon Johnson.
Yeah. And so as I do, if I see somebody reporting something, I reported it and gave them credit. And apparently that's not good enough in the minds of some people who think they know how journalism works, but apparently really don't, because they say it's behind their paywall and thus only their members can read it.
By the way, the state newspaper and the Post and Courier also have paywalls, yet we reference their stories all the time.
Well, absolutely. I don't apologize for it. That's how the game is played. That's how journalism is done. If you report what somebody else is doing and you attribute it to that source, then you are following the laws of journalism, and that's what we do.
It's the way we work. And some other news on the defensive side of the football for South Carolina coming up next.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
A lot happening here on Sports Talk. The commitment of 2020 Myrtle Beach quarterback Luke Doty, which we'll be talking about, trying to effort a chance to talk to him here on Sports Talk. And, of course, we'll have more on that at SportsTalkSC.com as time permits. We want to hear from you, 800-956-7266, talking about the Gamecocks quarterback situation, the Clemson quarterback situation, and the way things look for South Carolina in the secondary, where they've made a position switch. Corn. It was Will Muschamp who spoke this morning on Teddy Hefner and Rick Sanford's show locally here.
Who? Teddy Hefner?
Ted Hefner.
I thought he was dead. He's still alive?
The second most prominent Jets fan in South Carolina.
Oh, Teddy. You know, Teddy's like an old pair of pajamas. You know, you think you've lost them, and you just open the drawer, and you see them in there. They might have holes and a few stains on them, but you still slap them on, and they sleep good.
Well, he was the beneficiary of receiving some good information that was not behind a paywall, that was given out free for everybody.
Is that going to be our thing the rest of the night, paywall?
Free for everybody to hear.
Can we put up a paywall? Can we get Trump to build us a paywall? Seriously, can we start charging for phone calls? Next caller, can we get your credit card number? We're gonna charge you $5.
Call collect. No, but Tavin Jackson, who was projected as a corner originally, according to what Muschamp said on their show earlier this morning, is going to be working out with the safeties, which of course adds to what South Carolina already has in store there. Stephen Montag, JT eBay, and I'm losing my voice.
Are you okay?
I have no idea.
This is kind of emotional for you, isn't it? You that upset about the move to a safety?
I have no idea what happened there.
Didn't realize that got next to you. Well, first of all, you don't know the status of Javon Charleston. Maybe we'll find out more at Media Day on Thursday. All right, that's got to be settled. So that's one guy's a question mark. So you mentioned eBay. You mentioned Montag. Jalen Dickerson being cleared. That's big because this is a guy that would have played last year had he not been hurt. So that's big. So you put Jackson back there with R.J. Roderick, Stephen Montag, eBay, Dickerson, Zay Brown. Those are the guys you look at right now. Oh, and Jamias Williams back there at safety as well.
That's the big wild card in my mind with Jamias Williams, because what he can bring to the table on the field as a safety, because, again, he was a guy who was being used as the nickel. I think it'll be important to keep him on the field at all times and be able to see if he can stay on the field at all times.
Well, look at it the way Muschamp, it seems like he's designing this thing is he's already put cement around Nixon's feet. That's my nickel. I don't want him at safety. I don't want him at corner. He is the perfect nickel. Now it tells me also that he and Tavares Robinson like to have one safety who's a hitter, and the other one a center fielder, one who sniffs the football and can get those interceptions when balls are thrown deep in the secondary. And so I think they think the combination of those two of what they want back there in the deepest part of the secondary.
All right, 800-956-7266. John in Rock Hill, you're up first, free of charge on Sports Talk. Welcome in.
Hey, how y'all doing?
We're doing fine.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the four moves the Braves made.
Show a little more enthusiasm when you call in there, John.
A
little more excitement.
Oh, no, I'm excited about the moves the Braves made. I'm not. I think they'll help the team. Getting John Venners, bringing him back, getting Brad Brock from Baltimore, and then today getting Gosman to help out the rotation. Thank goodness, getting somebody to the rotation. And Darren O'Day also came over with Gosman, but O'Day will not be able to pitch the rest of the season. But I think he'll help out next year, if he can't pitch this season because of a hamstring.
I'd be hesitant to take anybody from Baltimore, even though we did.
Well, the problem is, and
we're such losers.
Appreciate the call.
I mean, a team that's playing 200 baseball, what, they playing about 200, 250? I mean, there's a reason that they stink because their players aren't very good.
Probably,
but we being the Yankees, of course, we did take Zach Britton, and I'm good with that.
Well, the thing about the Orioles is that a lot of their pitching minds that are currently now with the Braves came from Baltimore. So they have a lot of advanced information on that with Brock and Darren O'Day, and of course with Gausman. And the thing about Gausman is he's under team control beyond this year. So that's partially why it took the house full of prospects that it took for them to get that deal done between him and O'Day, who is also currently injured.
Yeah, you got to remember he's only 27 years old, and they've got him for 2 years. I think they have arbitration both years.
Yeah.
But he's a guy that's under control for 2 years. O'Day, yeah, it looks like if he even decides to even throw, he was put on the 60-day DL on June 27th, I believe it was. So only time you get him is in September. But I'm kind of leery about those submarine pitchers anyway. First of all, I don't like looking at them because it looks strange.
I remember when he was a Met, he could not get left-handers out to save his life. It was terrible. Back to the Gamecocks, though, more, it just seems to me that there's no big there's no bigger position in my mind of concern for South Carolina than that safety position.
I think you're dead on. Inexperienced, and they lost 2 good safeties. I happen to have been a big fan of DJ Smith.
Yeah,
I thought he was good. I thought he was physical.
You thought he was going to get drafted.
I did. I mean, I thought he was at a safety spot, the kind of nasty safety that South Carolina hadn't had since Swearinger. He kind of played with that attitude. Now we'll see what develops with these new guys, and they're talented new guys. Again, Dickerson was a guy that would have played last year had he not suffered the shoulder injury, I think it was. Jamias Williams. The thing that concerns me with him, again, if he's in a situation with a tall receiver, if he's back there in man coverage, and the guy's a 6'4", 6'5". I know, Pro, you've talked about the way to break that up. But he's only 5'8", and you get a receiver who's tall, who can jump and can high point the ball. How's he going to go up and defend that?
Bob Sanders is only 5'9".
Well,
he did fine.
There we go. I told him Bob Sanders.
Yeah, but I mean, you're talking about an NFL Hall of Fame safety.
But we're talking about a guy with the same build and the same structure.
But abilities, you can't say he's got the same abilities.
I don't think we've seen enough of him
because
on the field
we haven't
yet.
seen him do it before.
Well, I just think it's gonna be. It could be nervous time back there at the back end of the defense if he's caught up in a situation where
Montag is only
somebody is towering over him.
Montag's only 1 inch taller. It's not like either of these guys back there are guys who are looking over people. That's the hard thing. I mean, it's a hard thing right now with what they're doing. They're very, very solid on the outsides with Fenton, with Nick Harvey, and with Keyshawn Nixon at nickel. The problem is up the middle.
Let's go to Glenn in North Charleston. Welcome in, Glenn. How are you?
How y'all doing?
Good.
Can you hear me?
Hang on a second. Glenn!
Okay, I'm on the Dick Tracy watch, so,
Ah.
But I just thought I'd try it and everything, but...
it really sounds good. It sounds crisp and clear. Yeah, it really sounds good. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's no thunder and lightning down here. It's trying to rain now.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, I got confidence in Will Muschamp and the depth of South Carolina. I still say they go 10 wins or better. And beat Clemson this year.
Ooh. You drinking some of that Charleston moonshine that I had last weekend?
Take Clemson.
Wow.
And take Clemson's place in the championship.
Ooh, no, I think Glenn's been drinking some of that Charleston moonshine that I might or may not have sampled 2 weeks ago.
Be careful about getting too close to those electronic devices because
iPhones,
they emit things that get in your brain and cause problems?
It might.
I'm not saying that's what he's suffering from, delusional and all that, but no,
we are savage today.
I do think that 9 or 10 wins. I mean, if South Carolina's sitting on 9 wins going to Clemson, then obviously they could get to 10.
They could logically, they could.
Yeah,
and
if they get to 10, if they're sitting on 9 by the time they get to Clemson, then I think they'll be in position. I think they will have won the East if they're sitting on 9 wins.
We say this a lot about both these teams. It would be the South Carolina thing to do to end a 4-game losing streak at Death Valley after having lost so embarrassing fashion over the last 4 years. It would be the South Carolina thing to do. And then turn back the next year and lose at home. That would be the thing to do.
Well,
if it was South Carolina.
When they get good, they tend to do well for a little period of time. Sustain it, yeah. All right, 800-956-7266. More calls coming up here on Sports Talk.
We'll talk more about that Gamecock building tour coming up tomorrow. I almost want to bring the last discussion that we were having during the break on air, but
that's behind our paywall.
It's six.
Can't put that out for free.
You are so. Oh.
Well, I'm just,
I know.
Some people are just juvenile, and I can't do anything about it. You just can't do anything about it. You just have to live with it.
800-956-7266. We've been talking a lot about the Gamecocks today. Luke Doty commits, the quarterback from Myrtle Beach, 2020 guy. Of course, the Tavin Jackson news comes out.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, because we talked last night about, and justifiably so, heaped praise on Clemson for what they're doing in recruiting. We also pointed out how the Tigers have gone national with their recruiting and all these commitments from all these different states, and only one from the state of South Carolina in their class. And we mentioned the number that South Carolina has in their 2019 class. Now, South Carolina, with this commitment for 2020, that's 4 commitments for them in the 2020 class, and that's 2 from the state of South Carolina. Clemson has 1 from the state in 2020. That's DeMonte Capehart. But Will Muschamp has made it a point to try and recruit the state of South Carolina hard and first and make that a priority. And he's doing well from that standpoint. There's been a few exceptions. A few guys have just left the state that I thought were kind of surprising to do so. But if you can protect your backyard and build your nucleus and your base with the best players in South Carolina, then that really is going to help you build that foundation for the long term of your program.
Well, this is something, and this is kind of backing off of something or jumping on top of something somebody else said about Alabama head coach Nick Saban, and I'm going to correlate it to where Clemson and South Carolina are. They said that Nick Saban at Alabama, he doesn't recruit. He selects. And Clemson is basically in that frame of mind right now. They have 22 commitments as we turn the calendar to August. When was the last time you ever thought that Clemson would have all but 3 of its class basically intact and not necessarily all solid guys, basically guys who aren't going to leave?
Well, actually, they're going to end up with about maybe 28 to 30 in this class. So they still have some work to do. But I hear what you're saying.
We can only sign 25, I thought.
You can only bring in 25 that count initially, but you can sign as many as you have room to count back in another class.
Right.
And they have the scholarship availability, as long as you don't go over 85 total.
Right.
It's confusing. You see these numbers of players being signed. Some are put in this class, some are put in that class. The 2 main numbers you have to remember: you cannot bring in more than 25 signees in a class that count, and you can't have more than 85 on scholarship at any one time. But you're right. As we talked last night about it, I mean, they do tend to, because of where they are nationally and the type of players they are attracting, they can be choosy and they can select who they want to receive offers and who they want to bring into their program. And that's the thing that Clemson has done with their branding, is they've made a Clemson offer. They've made a Clemson offer kind of a special thing.
Right.
Notre Dame has that. Getting a Notre Dame offer, especially, I can remember years ago in the state of South Carolina, boy, when a kid got a Notre Dame offer, it was big news, and it pissed off the coaches at South Carolina and Clemson. They hated the fact that the media would take the information on a Notre Dame offer for an in-state kid and go, wow, look at this. This kid got an offer from Notre Dame. And they're like, well, what about when they get an offer from us? Well, but Notre Dame was that kind of selective. They're that selective in who they offer. Clemson has gotten to that point, and they deserve it because of where their program is. So when a kid gets an offer from Clemson, they do make a big deal out of it. They do think it's something special.
And here's the difference kind of where Clemson and South Carolina are. Clemson, when they offer a kid and they either say no or they don't get them, basically their response is, listen, you need Clemson more than we need you. Whereas Carolina is in a position where Will Muschamp is saying to guys, listen, we need you badly because, it's the opposite basically in that regard. So in that regard, I'm looking at this from the standpoint of, that's why we're seeing all these offers. That's why we saw all those offers went out for South Carolina in the spring, especially with the accelerated recruiting cycle, with now, of course, the early signing period. And while South Carolina is not as far ahead as Clemson is with their recruiting numbers and where their numbers are, I think they're around 16, 17 where they are with their class right now.
18,
yeah. So
that's if you count. I'm assuming they're counting in this class Belk and the kicker. Transfer kicker as well,
Hines,
I think, has to count in this class.
Yeah, so in that sense, there's obviously a lot that still has to be taken care of for them, but they're at a point where they still have 18, and that's with all the offers they put out. That's still a pretty good, again, you juxtapose it with Clemson. That's still a very good haul for this point of the year.
I just think even if South Carolina was where Clemson is, Muschamp just has that type of personality that he's going to aggressively recruit. I don't care how many numbers I have. I'm in somebody's face.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the way he recruits.
To Florence for our next call. Wes, welcome into Sports Talk. How are you?
Hey, Phil, pretty good. I think Lance Legree is the guy you were talking about. He grew up a Clemson fan. He loved Clemson, and Notre Dame snuck in and gave him an offer. He went ahead and committed to go there. This is going back a ways. This is back from like the 90s. But that's the first person I thought in my head when you said that. Number two, do you think that Clemson is recruiting nationally? I mean, they're getting like Alabama, where, like you said, they can cherry pick. Do you think that if it ever happens, and I play it on, I'm a Tiger fan, but if it ever happens and Dabo decides to leave and go somewhere else, or retire or whatever, do you think it's going to hurt Clemson that they're not actively offering all the kids in South Carolina like the Gamecocks are in the state?
Well, it's a good question.
Chicken and egg question.
First of all, he is going to leave one day. I mean,
Yeah.
he's going to die at some point. Or
It's very morbid of you.
Well, I mean, that's true, right? That's the only thing that we're guaranteed. We don't know when he's going to retire. We don't know if he's going to leave for Alabama or the NFL. We do know he's going to die one day, okay? So that's guaranteed. So he will not be the coach at Clemson forever.
Well, so much of Clemson's branding is tied to Dabo, though, right?
Well, it should be. I mean,
But
he
I'm
is
just
the face of the program.
It's dangerous, though, like you said.
The question is, from Wes, is look, if you're getting great players from outside your states, I mean, and they're great players, exactly.
Who cares?
Well, yeah.
And they bought into your program, and they want to make the upstate of South Carolina their home for 3 years and the years to come. That is not a mistake if they're great players. Now, see, look, let's be honest here. Clemson passed on Shi Smith.
Yes.
Clemson passed on Brian Edwards.
Yes.
Clemson passed on DeCarrion Joyner.
Debo Samuel.
I dare say, I got to go back and think about Debo.
I think he's right.
But those three I remember clearly. They would have gone to Clemson with an opportunity to play the position they wanted to play. But Clemson was going to play Edwards at safety, Joyner at safety, and then they got Amari Rogers, and they didn't need Shi Smith. They would have all gone to Clemson, I do believe. And so South Carolina benefited from that for however they got him. They got him in all three, and Ortre Smith would really be at fourth because Ortre Smith was his whole family is Clemson people.
He was a legacy
mother
guy.
played volleyball there, but Clemson with their receiving core the way it is with T. Higgins already in, a big tall receiver, they looked at him more as a tight end, which he doesn't want to be. South Carolina said, "Come here, you play wide receiver." So South Carolina benefits from that, and however you got them by hook or crook, they're all going to be, and they are important players in your program. So, but Clemson's been able to go out of the state and get players they think are better than what they have in state, and they're benefiting from it. But USC is benefiting on the rebound.
And the key point of this whole situation is Clemson is now in a position where they're still recruiting outside of the state, but they haven't ticked off the high school coaches in this state. That's when you have a problem. And so they've got great rapport with the high school
and I'll tell you
coaches
why.
in the state.
I'll tell you why. They do their due diligence in state. They're
Right.
still going through the schools.
Exactly.
They're still examining the players. If you tell the coach, we like your guy, he's a good player, but we've got somebody higher up on our board, he can't argue with that.
And I just don't understand, going back to something you said, I'm going to say it in a different way. I don't understand the fascination with needing to have players who are in your state. If a player is a good player, I don't care if you went to high school on the moon. I want him on my football team. Just because he has a South Carolina area code and a zip code doesn't mean that I absolutely positively want him on my football team.
But they play good football in the state.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
It's such a weird day. I'm just behind the scenes. It's a weird day here, folks. But we thank you for listening to us on Sports Talk on all of our 30 terrestrial radio affiliates. If you want to look at our affiliates, you can do so online, SportsTalkSC.com. Find out where you could find us in the state, including friends in Myrtle Beach on WSCA, which we can tell you today that Myrtle Beach's Luke Doty, the latest commitment for South Carolina, is going to join us an hour from now on Sports Talk to talk about his pledge to the Gamecocks, which he made official about 45 minutes ago. So we're going to have him on. Also, our affiliate in Columbia, 100.7 The Point, never preempts us. So if you're listening to us on TuneIn Radio, you can check out WQCL there. They have us up and ready to go. So if you're ever finding us or lose us over the air, we also have our fantastic Periscope, which is online at Sports Talk SC. And speaking of quarterbacks, Corn, we've been talking a lot about the quarterbacks of the future. Carolina quarterback of the past has made a career change.
Connor Shaw, hired back in the spring to be tight ends coach at Furman. And Furman announced today that he's leaving to enter private business. They quickly replaced him by promoting a member of their staff, a former player at Furman, Drew Duke, the new tight ends coach. He's a 2018 Furman grad. He'd been a student assistant coach for 3 seasons, including the last 2 in quality control. So he succeeds Connor, who resigned Monday to accept a position in private business. So a little change of plans for his career. I'm just thinking, young father, maybe the time demands, the travel, all the recruiting, maybe that was just something he didn't want to pursue.
Yeah, remember we had him on in advance of that event around Father's Day where he was talking about, being a dad. And, I found it very interesting because he was talking very much about the opportunity to kind of be home and be with the family and stuff like that. And I found it very, very odd that the first avenue that he goes to after his playing career was back into coaching because, whether you're at South Carolina or Clemson or Furman or Coastal or Wofford, there's a time commitment involved, even if you're a tight ends coach, whether it's film study, whether it's recruiting, whether it's game planning, all kinds of those things. It was going to be the same kind of time commitment. I know that it was taking place in his hometown in Greenville, where they have set up shop now and where they've built their family and all that is very much intact there. It's not like they're going to Chicago or going elsewhere. But the fact of the matter is, it was still going to take a significant time commitment, and I just found it very, very odd and wondered if that sticks. And again, I don't think that's anything that's a negative thing on Connor's character. I think it's just, again, a more of a change in philosophy of what he wants for his family.
Well, I thought it would stick because his dad's a coach.
Yeah, his dad coming from the family where the whole family's football. Dad's a coach. I think his brother J-Bo might have gone into coaching once he finished his career. And maybe it just was something he realized he just did not want to pursue at this particular time, especially, when you're a college coach, like you said, so much has to go into it. But not only that, I mean, if you're an NFL coach, your job consists strictly of dealing with X's and O's, teaching and working with players. But when you're a college coach, so much more besides. I think the Xing and Oing is like maybe 20% of what you do. So much of it's recruiting.
Be a GM, a parent, basically, to these kids too.
Yeah.
Mentor.
And make sure they go to class and make sure they behave and da-da-da-da-da. If you're an NFL coach, none of that's on your back. You got people who deal with it. So
you're telling them how to do everything except wipe their behind.
Sometimes certainly under that. Somebody just texted me here who said that Luke Doty's dad played basketball at Erskine.
Oh,
did not know that.
He's
a flying fleeter.
You get that from your Mr. Bethea over there?
I can't it's behind our paywall, and I can't disclose my sources.
Dr. Gamecock tweets us. We were talking about South Carolina in-state recruiting. He said, "Didn't you have an entire show last week dedicated to, quote, Frank Martin needs to do better in state?" I defer to you because I was not here last week.
Yeah, we talked a lot about recruiting from basketball standpoint. It just depends on the year. I mean, it's common sense that in a year where you've got Zion Williamson coming out and 2 or 3 other major prospects coming out in your state, 2018 was.
In 2019 will be.
Well, let's start with 2018. I mean, you had Williamson, you had Burns, who became a 2018 guy, you had Jimmy Nichols, you had Aaron Neesmith, all Division I guys. I mean, if you're South Carolina and you've offered all of them, you like to go 3 for 4 if you can.
Or 1.
Or
get
2
1
for 2.
Get
right.
1.
They got shut out for whatever reason. Okay. Now you're looking at 2019, and we all know what this class has. Yeah, it's important to get these players in your home state. Now, you know, I read the stuff and I see people saying AJ Lawson, man, he's as good as anybody they didn't get. He's as good as PJ Dozier, et cetera, et cetera. And time will tell on that. And Trey Campbell looks really good. Now, these are observations coming off people who just watched the Summer League, the
Pro-Am,
week of Summer League here in Columbia, the Pro-Am, where, you know, you take that with a big grain of salt because, I mean, they play defense about how we would play defense out there. It's the Olay factor, I would say. Now, that's reputation. I wasn't there. Pro was there to watch some of it, but just typical. I saw some of the highlights on television, and I didn't see many contested shots from what I saw.
Well, one of the reasons you didn't see many is because, again, I talk about the thick dude.
Frank.
The referees swallow the whistles, and Frank just barreled over Carlos Powell. No call, nothing. And Carlos.
Well, where do you think they got the officials from? They didn't come from the ACC or the SEC. They probably came from the Columbia Rec League.
It wasn't Ted Valentine out there. We've talked a lot about recruiting today. Corn, what do you have?
Yeah, again, the top story of the night, big for South Carolina, 2020 Luke Doty, 6'2", 190 from Myrtle Beach, commits to the Gamecocks a day after visiting. He also had offers from NC State, Virginia Tech, TCU, Auburn, Duke, North Carolina, Ole Miss, Florida State, and others. He's been the backup for the Seahawks the past 3 seasons. He'll be the starter moving forward. Last season, he passed for 700 yards, 5 touchdowns. He rushed for 250 and a score. He caught 35 passes for 391 yards and 5 touchdowns. This is according to the Myrtle Beach football website. While he hasn't taken a lot of snaps under center in high school, he has been seen in camps and on the 7-on-7 circuit. His coach, Mickey Wilson, tells us he's just dynamic. He said a lot of kids that can run exceptionally well, that play the QB position a lot of time. When they get forced out of the pocket, they'll just take off and run. He said he's a kid that still keeps his eyes downfield once he gets out of the pocket. He has a great ability to extend plays. He sounds a lot like Connor Shaw from South Carolina. He gives the Gamecocks 4 commitments for 2020. Clemson offered defensive lineman Jacob Bandes, 6'3", 295, Antioch, California. Big timer. Florida, Illinois, Cal, Ole Miss, Colorado, Washington, Oregon State. He said that he will take an official visit to Clemson in December. Former Ben Lippen quarterback Patrick McClure, who had signed with Jacksonville, will now walk on at Clemson. Defensive lineman Xavier McIver of Chiron was offered by Wake Forest. He also has a USC offer along with South Florida and Tulane. 2018 receiver Xavion Gordon of Chapin committed to the University of Charleston in West Virginia. One-time USC and Clemson target linebacker Kalen DeLoach committed to Florida State. USC offered safety Dedrick Holmes, 6'1", 179 out of Evans, Georgia. That's the first major offer for him. He and the Gamecocks go back to his 9th grade year when he was at camp. He said that they like his length. They like the way he is a ball hawk. He had 9 interceptions last season.
That's a lot.
Broke up 7 passes, had 49 tackles, according to Max Preps. He was at USC to watch a practice in March, and he said Travaris Robinson called him Sunday with the offer. He's also getting interest from Auburn, Miami, Ole Miss, UCF, Troy, Georgia, and Georgia Tech. His other offer is from Liberty, and he wants to see Auburn. He plans to return to USC for a game this season. And that'll do it for recruiting for now. We'll have more for you, of course, up on our website tonight. And Luke Doty at
7:45.
Yeah, the last part of the program, we'll have him on live to talk about his commitment.
We'll talk more coming up, including which groups need to step up for both Carolina and Clemson, and our concerns about Brian McClendon as a first-time play caller.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, Hour 2 as we begin here on a Tuesday, the final day of July. We will turn the page tomorrow and unofficially or officially, depending on how you look at it, begin our 35th football season covering the Gamecocks and Tigers here in the state of South Carolina. A very big pride point for us here. Well, Pelagic, Phil Kornbluth, Professor Tom Hayes, and we'll do it as we've done it always, about as well as anybody can in the state, being at all the games, getting ourselves situated for that, and very much a part of the coverage here. And we've been looking a lot kind of at these positions inside both South Carolina and Clemson. And on Twitter at SportsTalkSC, the question was brought to us by our pal Britton, who tweets us at SportsTalkSC. Besides quarterback, what group needs to step up for Carolina or Clemson and Clemson this year?
Besides quarterback, which group needs to step up for Carolina and Clemson this year? All right, well, for South Carolina, I think that you look at the offensive line, which has been kind of made over.
My first thought, exactly.
And I tell you, I feel as confident for South Carolina and this offensive line as I have in a long, long time. This looks like a good group of offensive linemen. I think Donnell Stanley's move to center is just going to just pay huge dividends. Big, strong guy. He can handle his business in the middle. He's flanked by two big guys who played a lot of football. Right tackle, Blake Camper, got to show that he can handle that position. Dennis Daly on the left side. Malik Young being worked in there, various spots. Eric Douglas perhaps getting some snaps in there at tackle. They'll need some young guys to come in and provide them with depth. So I think that's obviously the spot that's got to really step up for them. We talked about safeties earlier. We know how iffy the back end of the defense is. Then for Clemson, and you look at their situation, and I'd have to say maybe the cornerback spot where Mark Fields is, a guy that's sort of been hit and miss in there. He's had some injuries. He's a senior now. He's been around a long time. They need him to play big and play more consistent. You think about the safety spots for the Tigers as well, where they've got to put some new faces back there and count on some guys to step up a little bit and replace some guys who have moved on. Tanner Muse has played a lot of football for them. He's kind of proven back there. Kayvon Wallace the same, but you look at Isaiah Simmons, Denzel Johnson, maybe Nolan Turner, providing them with some depth. And point out an area where they have a weakness. Trey Lamar's got to continue to come on at linebacker. Maybe Shaq Smith's going to get more snaps this year and help them in some form or fashion. But they look solid. They look experienced across the board on offense and defense. Look at all the players who have played a ton of snaps. You look at their offensive line, Hyatt, Simpson, Falcinelli, Pollard, and Ankrum have all played a lot of football. Ankrum probably maybe the least. I don't know what his snap count is, maybe the least. And but they've moved him around. So they got to, he's got to step it up and prove that he's a starter. Maybe tight end. Maybe they need a. You look at their tight end, and Mylan Richard or J.C. Chalk or Cannon Smith. You wonder who's going to. Maybe it's going to be the freshman Galloway.
Yeah, I would say they are very, very high on Galloway.
The big key is something very subtle, and that is the versatility of playing the running back position. One of the reasons Alabama got penetration so much against Clemson, because they knew they could overload the rush and knew that the running backs weren't going to pick it up.
You stole my thunder. I was going
there. And they did not pick it up. And let's face it, if the hair is the quarterback, they better have a running back in there that can pick up the blitz. They got to.
My two answers are the same position for both teams for different reasons. The reason you just sided with Clemson, they need to get more running out of players not named Kelly Bryant. I know that Travis Etienne is a home run threat. But outside of that, 2-3 yards a pop is not necessarily going to cut it for Clemson if you want to diversify that offense, and you need pass protection help. And for South Carolina, would it shock you to know, Corn, that last year South Carolina was in the mid-80s in the country in third down conversion percentage, 12th in the SEC. The two teams behind them fired their head coaches, Florida and Tennessee.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And a lot of that had to do with many 3rd and 2s and 3rd and 3s and 3rd and 1s and 4th and 1s that were not picked up because of the fact that they were in very big short yardage situations, could not get it done. A lot of that was having to do with the fact that they didn't have Rico Dowdle. A lot of that was having to do with they had a makeshift offensive line at times because of injuries. But regardless, whoever has to step up, the running game for South Carolina and Clemson outside of their quarterback position, both of those facets need to step up.
Here's the confidence you have to have, which is why I agree with Phil that this offensive line in the middle is going to pay dividends for them, because I don't think there's a better time to throw the ball deep than when it's 2nd or 3rd and short, especially if you're beyond the 50, because there you say, well, we can pick up 1 or 2 yards. So you're going to gamble and throw the ball deep one time, and you're going to pop a guy wide open because everybody's looking at the short yardage deal. So if you're confident that you can get 1 or 2 yards on 4th down, you're going to try on 3rd down in certain situations to hit the home run.
And to go back to the tight end, and this was something that was brought up when we were talking with the offensive coaches at Dabo Swinney's golf tournament 2 weeks ago. If there was one freshman who got as many, or at least the second most mentions on the offensive side of the football for Clemson outside of Trevor Lawrence, it was Braden Galloway. They are very, very high on him. He will see the field in 2018, and you might even see him split out with that 6'6" frame. He is a guy who you could high point a football to down near the red zone. That brings you a target. It cannot be covered by a single person on the opposite side.
If he can stay healthy. He's had some injury issues, lower leg issues, things of that nature. But he is a talent, but he is a freshman. But they would like
size. Can't teach size.
They would like a guy who can stretch the field, no doubt about it. 800-956-7266. Phone number. Email talkback@sportstalksc.com, and on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. A couple of quick notes. The FCS preseason All-American team from Stats released today. On the first team, Wofford defensive lineman Miles Brown. On the second team offense, the Citadel offensive lineman Tyler Davis. Third team offense, Wofford fullback Andre Stoddard. Those are the guys from the state represented there. NC State has hired its new pitching coach. He comes from the state of South Carolina. They hired Clint Chrysler, who had been the pitching coach at Winthrop, and he replaces Scott Foxhall, who left to become the pitching coach at Mississippi State.
Under brand new head coach Chris Lemonis.
Yeah. And I think that covers some of the notes that we have run across today.
Justin Minaya is going to be playing in Italy. I don't know if you saw this corner. He is going to be with a collegiate all-star team, the USA East Coast team. He'll be playing for the next 4 days, or at least for 4 days, beginning Friday through Monday, for a group that will be coached by Larry Brown. They're going to play against teams from Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and a team also in Italy. This is something that the Carolina players have been in before. Tyrone Johnson, Darius Thornwell, Hassani Gravett also represented Carolina last year in this particular tournament. So that'll be very interesting to see. They'll be at Columbia University in New York before going to Italy tomorrow. So that'll be interesting for Minaya, and another continued exposure for him on the international circuit, where he has a lot of responses and a lot of notoriety as well.
Can only help him get better. You know, Kerry Rich riding on, can I mention this? Riding on the Big Spur? Was that behind the paywall?
Why not?
Can I mention that without being accused of thievery? He wrote from watching the Gamecock players in his Summer Pro League that this Gamecock team, with this group coming in and the returning veterans, will surprise people, will be better than people think. I think right now people don't have high hopes for this USC basketball season because of just about complete turnover in personnel.
We'll go to the pro game. Another big loss for the Carolina Panthers, which we'll talk about. Maybe a little bit on the Braves trade. Coming up about 30 minutes from now, we're going to hear from the latest South Carolina commitment, Luke Doty. Sports Talk continues on South Carolina Radio Network. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. We're brought to you by the folks at Founders Federal Credit Union. Whether it's low rates or high rewards using select Founders credit cards on clothes, school supplies, he said.
Surprise.
Supplies. A new computer or even college tuition will help you prepare your kids for their first day of school. Apply online at foundersfcu.com/visa.
Remind everybody that Luke Doty will join us here in about 25 minutes, be his first statewide interview since he announced his commitment to South Carolina for the 2020 class. Big start for the Gamecocks. Well, fourth commitment, but like you said earlier, this is the kind of commitment that should attract other skill position people to your program. And I would think now, and I mean, I guess you want to take a quarterback every year.
Yes, you do. You have to.
It could get a little more difficult in finding a high-level quarterback who wants to commit to you.
It doesn't matter. It's the one thing, I don't know as much about recruiting as you do. I would never even.
Oh, that's okay.
Would never even try to get that.
You could be there if you tried.
I could be there, but I would never surpass your knowledge. But the one thing I do know, and having, covered this sport for as long as I have, not as long as you have, but as long as I have, is that you take a quarterback every year regardless. Right. You need to take a quarterback just from a sheer depth standpoint, attrition standpoint. Things happen. You need to have a quarterback, not necessarily a guy who you can put on the field, but somebody who shows a competence. And even that, for the reason that you suggested, a lot of people will have an aspect of, going around a guy and wanting to play with a guy because what do quarterbacks do? Your quarterback, a lot of times, is your best recruiter. Think about what Ryan Helinski has been doing on the West Coast and getting people exposed to South Carolina who might not have originally had themselves exposed to the Gamecocks.
I don't think a lot of the receivers at Clemson's they didn't get because Trevor Lawrence was on campus. I mean, that's a big attraction for you.
And looking at some of the guys, even with Clemson, looking at what Mr. Pumachan has done, obviously too. He's
Pumachan.
And again, they keep on saying it's a down year for quarterbacks. Well, guess what? Clemson got one of the 2 or 3 guys who are high level guys. Pumachan and Helinski being 2 of those guys.
And they may grab Mr. Ukulele, whatever his name is, out in California.
Uagalele. Uagalele. That's what it is.
Uagalele.
We're gonna have to get a lot of these Hawaiian names out of here now too.
I'm telling you, we're finding more and more of those popping up.
No wonder Hawaii almost stopped their program. They can't get any guy to stay on the island. Apparently,
we're gonna. And then, we might also have some Cockburn too with the guy coming in for Carolina.
He's got to go to South Carolina. I mean, that's just too perfect to have a player in your program. If you're the Gamecocks, have a player by the last name of Cockburn. Can you imagine the various headlines? Let's just say the Gamecocks beat Kentucky on a stuff by Cockburn at the buzzer. The headlines could be,
it just doesn't sound right.
Gamecocks Cockburn Kentucky, or Cockburn sticks it to. I mean, just all kind of play on the name that you can have.
Really doesn't.
I mean, get your mind out of the gutter. I mean, it's what it is.
It doesn't sound right.
No, that's his name.
I know it's his name. It doesn't sound right.
You think Pelagic sounds right?
And Kofi doesn't sound strange. The first name, Kofi.
800-956-7266. Danny is calling from Jackson. Danny, you're on Sports Talk. Hello, Danny.
Okay. Long-time supporter of Clemson and Booster, and ever since the Danny Ford days, Clemson's always flourished and done really well when their offensive line performed. And as long as I've followed them, whenever they heap a lot of praise on the offensive line, they always seem to falter. Last year, just like the Alabama game, that was the weakness of the whole game, was their offensive line. It wasn't so much the running back, I don't think, as it was the line just getting overwhelmed.
One side of the line. It was the right side of the offensive line. It was Pollard and Ankrum, and that whole right side was where the
it only takes one.
Yeah.
Realistically, when you're playing a team like Alabama that's as good as they are, it only takes one. And in your case, you're talking about 2. So that is bad. This year, though, we've got a pretty good set starters, but we've got some redshirt freshmen, and we've got a couple of other guys that are penciled in. So what do you think about the starters? I think will be good. I really like our center, and I'm sure Hyatt's got a lot to prove. I know Simpson's good, but what about the other guys? What about the first guys off the bench that's going to have to play?
Well, you look at your left tackle. Blake Vincent is the backup at left tackle behind Hyatt, but you got Jackson Carman waiting in the wings, and if he gets his weight down, though, he's still got to get a little bit lighter, you could say, because I mean he was 330 something pounds, but he's a big man.
I think he was 350.
Yeah, he's a big man with a big arm reach, and I'm sure he's very powerful. Matt Bockhurst could be a guy in the rotation at guard, primarily right now, backing up John Simpson.
Yeah. They are very high on Gage Cervenka too.
Well, Cervenka, the backup center primarily, maybe could play some guard if necessary, and I think Cade Stewart is another guy who's backing up Sean Pollard at the other guard position. Would be in a position. He's been in the program now going on 3 or 4 years. Well, no, he wasn't. He was a preferred. I think he was a gray shirt back in the day. I think he was a gray shirt, originally a gray shirt, and I think maybe eventually got a scholarship in his class when some other things went through. So no, he was not a walk-on. He was a recruited guy, if my memory is right.
And the thing about this is, Corn, I mean, you used to think of like you have a backup left tackle, backup left guard, backup center, you have a backup for each position. Really, they are cross-training a lot of these guys, especially these bench guys who come on and off the bench to play all 3 positions, especially, when you think about center, because you need so many guys to be able to play center, especially because of the shotgun snaps these days. If that ends up happening, if you lose your center, like Carolina had a couple of years ago when they lost Alan Knott. So from that perspective, you're looking at, okay, who are the best 3 guys or 4 guys who can come in? I hear the offensive line coaches a lot of times talk about, your top 9 or whatever, who you can count on if possibly you get an injury. That's, I think, the biggest thing. And I think when you talk about Cervenka, when you talk about Bockhurst, and again, I still think, I know you're even Jordan McFadden, a guy like that. I mean, that's another guy who could contribute early on too. I mean, there are a lot of these guys who are going to have to get some snaps for Clemson because of what they might be losing. I mean, you think about Mitch Hyatt graduating. There's going to be a lot.
Somebody texted me while we were talking about positions that need to step up, South Carolina and Clemson, and we should have, and he was right about this. I should give him credit as much as it pains me. It was Reggie Anderson of TV19 in Columbia.
He took a break from abusing his kid. Do text you?
Columbia's 6th-ranked TV anchor. By the 4-station market.
That was satire, just so people don't think that's.
But anyway, he mentioned the kicker at South Carolina, and I think there's maybe a little bit of anxiety about the kicking position going into camp because the kickers were
kickers now.
The kickers were a little inconsistent. They changed kickers after the first couple of weeks last year, and now they've got a transfer who's coming in. But again, it's going to be a wide open competition in camp at kicker, and I mean it's easy to solve. Whoever can split the upright is going to be the guy.
Well, it's interesting. It's a two-way street to me because it almost seemed that every time you had a kick in 35 yards in, it was almost a make. But how many times, and we talk about that 1 or 2 yards again, how many times would South Carolina bog down inside the 30, about the 35 and make it a 40-yard kick? It's like they move, every field goal was over 40 yards.
It's weird. South Carolina left a lot of points on the football field last year, whether it was by, like we said earlier, the 3rd and 4th down conversions, or like we're saying now with the field goals. Imagine if they got some of those in games like A&M and Kentucky, how much differently would we be looking about that season? And we looked very highly on the Gamecock season last year. I think, 9 wins and a bowl game victory on New Year's Day is nothing to sneeze at. But there were some shortcomings and inefficiencies that could have made it better.
But as I said before, I think the big key, though, is a team like Alabama. Alabama, as good as it is, Nick Saban knows where to put the makeup on the bad spots.
Well, he's had kicker issues himself.
I thought they lost that championship game when he bricked that field goal. I said, when he bricked it late, I said, Georgia's going to win it.
Ask Auburn about the kicker struggles at Alabama. Just saying, a little bit too much. We'll go racing next with Kerry Tharp, president of Darlington Raceway, as we continue on Sports Talk. Luke Doty coming your way in 15 minutes. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on this Tuesday evening. Let's go racing. They were just at Pocono, the gentlemen of NASCAR were, and now they'll go upstate racing at the Glen. El Presidente is on board with us, Corn.
Kerry Tharp, president of Darlington Raceway, with us here on Sports Talk. KT, how are you?
I'm doing great, Phil. In fact, I'm just leaving the racetrack right now. It's a beautiful evening over here in Darlington, and we're closing in on 30 days until the NASCAR circus comes to town. So we're doing fine. Hard to believe it's coming at us that quickly, but we're excited about it. So we're coming off another pretty good race at Pocono. I know the late wrecking set up a finish, but I tell you what, Kyle Busch, what a great driver. I mean, you've really got to put him now in the land of the greats. And to think that Hendrick Motorsports booted him back in the day to make way for Dale Jr. I know Dale Jr. did some good things with them, and they made a ton of money off of it. But my goodness, in every aspect of racing, Kyle Busch is among the best, and climbing up the victory chart now with 49 wins in the Monster Cup Series. He's just going to keep pushing the marks higher and higher as his career continues, and he's got a lot of years left. Well, there's no question, Phil. I think before it's all said and done, his name in the record books is going to be right at the top. And that's something that Kyle's always had his sights on, winning as many races as he possibly can across all three national series, and already won 49 Cup races, 51 truck races. He's the all-time leader in Xfinity Series races. The numbers that he's going to post across all three national series are going to be out of sight. And, right now he is on top of his game. In my mind, he is racing and performing better than any other driver in the garage. And, he's a force to be reckoned with, no doubt about it. He is the restart king, is he not? No question. I mean, you get Kyle Busch in a restart, then you better see who's racing for second, because he's not going to take any prisoners when it comes to restarts, and he's very, very good at those, and he showed that the other night or the other day at Pocono when he had several late restarts where he had to beat some of his teammates, Suarez and Eric Jones and others, and he certainly was up for the task. You mentioned Kerry Tharp, Darlington Raceway president, joining us here on Sports Talk. You mentioned you're less than 30 days away from the race. I'm going to pat you on the back here because, as I usually do to prepare for this segment, look at your website, see if you guys have any news to report. And you are having one of my favorite bands perform the national anthem at Darlington Raceway for the Southern 500. You have Hanson performing the national anthem. I need a backstage access pass to get a picture with Hanson. Can you make that happen? Well, we can take care of that, Will. I tell you what, they were brought to my attention here several months ago, actually, when we were looking for a national anthem performer. And I'd heard of Hanson back in the day. Oh, yeah. They were very, very popular. But I tell you what, the rendition I saw that they did, I believe it was at a Major League Baseball game here a couple of years ago for the national anthem, was outstanding. And so, that really sold me on them. They have a little bit of that throwback flavor to them. Obviously they were very, very popular back in the 90s, and they still tour and are still very, very popular. Can you get them to sing Mbop instead? Well, we'll see. I don't know how well that goes with Francis Scott Key's national anthem, but they certainly, I think, have some name recognition. And so you combine them to sing the national anthem. Excuse me, we got Clay Walker doing the pre-race concert. He's a very popular country artist from the 90s and had a lot of #1 hits. So I think from a talent standpoint on Sunday in particular, we're in pretty good shape. KT, Kerry Tharp with us here on Sports Talk. And the NASCAR world lost a giant on the media side today as Tom Higgins passed away at the age of 80. And I can remember when I first started following NASCAR in the papers, reading the Observer, and man, this guy was so dialed in to everything happening in NASCAR and such a great rider and very, very close with everything that went on inside the garage. What your thoughts about him and what he meant in getting the NASCAR story out to the masses? Well, Phil, he was one of the best of all time. And the times that I was around Tom, when I first got into the sport, he was pretty much in the twilight of his career and had already retired from full-time covering the sport. But he was always so gracious, so helpful. I'd see him at the media center, particularly, or I might see him at the NMPA conventions there in Charlotte. He would always take time to visit with you and share a few stories and give you some words of encouragement. But he always had a great attitude about the sport, and he was a great storyteller about the sport. And so, you know, he's going to be sorely missed. But he left a lifelong legacy in his particular field. As you said, he reported the sport to millions of readers over the course of his career. And, you know, we're better off with having him in the sport, and he will be missed.
You talked about the exploits of Kyle Busch and him winning at the Poconos. I got a feel that in the back of your mind, somewhere there, you're hoping that, wait a minute, Kyle, don't win another race for the next 3 weeks. So you go to Darlington looking for number 50.
Right. Well, that's pretty good there, Tom. That's a great point. And you know what's pretty interesting, I think, and I've been trying to talk about it a little bit here the last week or so, is, you know, you've got the big three. You've got Kyle Busch, you got Kevin Harvick, you got Martin Truex Jr. They each have one Bojangles Southern 500 win under their belts. And we're unveiling this Wall of Honor this year before our race. It'll be on the front stretch and the back stretch. Kind of likens itself to the Cowboys Ring of Honor. And each one of those drivers have their names on the wall. But, you know, who's going to be the one that gets it up there twice? In other words, who's going to be next year where it says two-time winner? And so I'm anxious to see of those three, which is the one to step up here at Darlington and win for the second time and win their second Bojangles Southern 500.
You know, we are going to be taking right turns this week at the Glen up in upstate New York. Martin Truex won the earlier road course race at Sonoma. Who are you looking for at Watkins Glen to possibly take the checkered flag?
Well, I tell you, that's a little bit different course than Sonoma. I always thought Watkins Glen was more like a super speedway, and Sonoma was more like a short track when it came to road courses. You know, a couple of years ago, I was up there, and A.J. Allmendinger got his one and only career win in the Cup Series. I'd be pulling for him this weekend to see what happens. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Again, all three of those drivers that we've been talking about, Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., extremely strong at the road courses. But I have a feeling that somebody outside those big three is going to win this weekend. Now, who that might be, I don't know. I think you keep an eye on Clint Boyer. He's really good, as is Kurt Busch.
How are things coming around your place? As, like you said, you're about 30 days away. Got to get those seats in place.
Yeah, we do. And I just came from a big meeting we had at the racetrack tonight, kind of our pre-event prep meeting with all the law enforcement, the security, the emergency track services people, and the seats are looking great. I was, in fact, I went up there yesterday and sat in the seats up in Tyler and sat in some of the bleachers in Wallace. What an improvement over what we've had there previously. The sight lines up in Tyler are so much better. The seats are wider and more comfortable. You got cup holders. In fact, I'd probably still be up there in the seats right now if I'd had the beverage of my choice up there. But it's going to be such a better experience. And, you know, we've still got some work to do. And so the contractors are working really double shifts to get everything done. But they should be done with the construction project here in about 2 weeks.
Listen, we enjoyed having you with us. We will catch you after the Glen next week, see how things happen up in upstate New York, and we'll find out what else is happening around Darlington. Remind everybody to give you guys a call or go to your website and get those tickets, because they could be a little harder to come by with a few less seats in the place this time around.
Right. Exactly, Phil. We appreciate it. We urge our fans to go get their tickets now. Thank you.
You were surprised by that Hansen drop in there? You had no idea who Hansen is, do you?
Who?
Mbop from the 90s.
Yeah, but I bet their voices have changed since then.
They couldn't get boys to men to do this?
Luke Doty's latest South Carolina quarterback commit joins us next.
More of your calls are coming up on Sports Talk. Hit us up at 800-956-7266.
It is Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. Well, you know why I love days like today? You know, there are days where you think you have your show planned out and then news drops right before you go on the air, and it has dominated our show. And South Carolina's latest quarterback commitment is Luke Doty, 2020 class out of Myrtle Beach, and he joins us now, Corn.
He does indeed, and I mean, you cannot overplay the bigness of this news for South Carolina football, getting a commitment from the state's top quarterback in the class and one of the projected top quarterbacks in the country for 2020 is Luke Doty. Joins us here from Myrtle Beach. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good.
Congratulations on your commitment. Tell us about kind of how it all came together for you and your family, and you reached the decision that now's the time to join Will Muschamp's group.
So I think the biggest thing for me was just, you know, the importance of, you know, being an in-state guy and playing for the great state of South Carolina and, you know, being represented on that stage. So I think that's the biggest thing for us. And, you know, it's close to home. So it's a place that, you know, my family and friends can go to watch games and have a great time.
When did you start to feel like this was going to be the right place for you? Because you have so many big offers and you still have a lot of high school time left. So when did you start to feel like, hey, I want to make this decision early, and you started feeling South Carolina?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, South Carolina has always been, you know, high up on the list, and they've always been like family to us. And, you know, they've treated us so well throughout these, you know, past few years. And I think when I started feeling, you know, where I really want to go here is kind of at the beginning of July, end of June, you know, after the camp season and after everything was kind of settled down a little bit. You know, I had a lot of time to think about it and talk about it with my family, and we sat down and kind of laid some things out, and you know, we got a plan together. And you know, I said, you know, South Carolina is where I want to be and where I feel best at.
You know, it's weird, Luke, as people, you know, the recruiting calendar is so much different now with the early signing period. And, you know, we're still a year and a half away from what that will entail for you as you get yourself ready for that. But how do you expect your recruitment and your recruiting process to change? Will you still take visits elsewhere, or how solid is your commitment to South Carolina in that?
I mean, I'm 110% committed to the University of South Carolina. And, you know, with that being said, you know, my recruitment is, you know, it's over. You know, I won't be making any more visits besides South Carolina. Like I said, I know where I want to be, and that's with, you know, the South Carolina Gamecock family.
That quarterback room at South Carolina continuing to look more and more impressive over the months and years here as Muschamp and company recruit. Of course, you still have a couple of years before you get there, but it'll still look pretty good when you get there. What do you think about, you know, stepping in there and having a chance to compete? What did they tell you about how they see you fitting in with what they do?
Well, I mean, they've definitely got a great quarterback room. I've been around those guys for, you know, a few years now, and really more now that I'm in high school and, you know, I can take these visits and stuff and really get to see how they interact on a day-to-day basis. And they're all just amazing guys, and they treat each other like brothers, and they push each other and pull for each other no matter what. And that's the kind of family atmosphere that I'm drawn to and that I love.
Well, you're the sort of athlete that really just pick up a football and throw it. You played other positions, including a receiver. So catching the passes, learning to run patterns, how does that help you become a better quarterback?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing, you know, being able to play different positions is it makes you more versatile. You know, I can go out there and line up at wide receiver, and I can also, you know, throw the ball. So really, it's just about learning and taking in information in different ways. And I definitely think playing, you know, different positions, even defense, helps my has helped my development as a quarterback and definitely an athlete for sure.
Talking with Luke Doty, 2020 quarterback commitment for South Carolina out of Myrtle Beach. How big a role did Dan Werner play in your decision from your meetings with him and the coaching staff on your visits and whatever other kind of a contact you guys had over the months?
I mean, he always just told me that, you know, I'm his guy and that that I'm, you know, I'm number one and I'm a big priority for him. And, you know, for me, that means a lot, especially, you know, coming from him in South Carolina, again, being the big state school and home. So, you know, that we've developed a great relationship over the past few months, and I've really got to know him, and, you know, I look forward to, you know, continuing to develop that relationship with him.
South Carolina quarterback commitment Luke Doty joining us here on Sports Talk out of the class of 2020. We saw the quarterback who South Carolina has taken ahead of you, at least in the class ahead of you, Ryan Helinski, at least that they plan to take with his letter of intent coming up later on this year. We've seen him be very active in the recruiting of other players to try and come to South Carolina. How do you see your role with that, and how do you plan on trying to get other people to latch on with you to come play with the Gamecocks?
Well, I think with, you know, my personality and, you know, me being who I am in this state and on a national level, I definitely want to, you know, continue that that tradition of, you know, getting guys on board with, you know, what South Carolina has going, and, you know, really develop a relationship with them and show them, you know, how good South Carolina has been to me and my family. And, you know, just kind of get them to fall in love with it like I did.
So you get your shot now as the main guy at quarterback with the Seahawks. I know you've kind of paid your dues and been used in several different ways, but now you get a chance to lead that offense. How's that going to feel to you?
Oh, man, it's awesome. You know, we started practice, like summer practice and stuff. And, man, it's just been so fun to, you know, be in control and, you know, be able to get with those guys and, you know, have such a great group of guys around me that are definitely going to help us in our goal to win a state championship.
Think y'all got a good chance to make a deep run?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got a very experienced team that you know knows what to do, and that's ready to play. So we're really excited for the season.
Hey, congratulations once again. Thank you for joining us. Have a great camp and a great season. We'll be keeping in touch, and all the best to you.
Thank you. Spurs up.
Luke Doty, 2020 quarterback commitment for South Carolina. Big day for the Gamecocks.
So refreshing. It's a refreshing personality, I think. And the thing that stood out to me is that it's important for him to see his friends and family play for the state of South Carolina. He's not going to take any visits anywhere else. He's solid in South Carolina. That's about as well as you could possibly state it.
Well, that's a pitch that South Carolina coaches have been making to in-state recruits. Stay home, help the flagship university for the state do its thing. You benefit from that, and you really do. I mean, if you're an in-state kid, you get an offer from Clemson or South Carolina, whether it's football or basketball, and you want to make the Palmetto State your home later on after whatever career you have. Boy, there are so many benefits to having played for an in-state school, especially one of those two, when it comes to your job future or anything else that you want to get into.
Well, the thing I like is the fact that he's from South Carolina, but he's in an area of South Carolina where he can do some of that exotic quarterback training of learning to shift his feet or whatever while standing on beach sand or standing in the ocean. You notice that they have quarterbacks doing that now.
That interview will be up on our website tonight. If you missed it, it'll be free, not behind a paywall.
God.
Also,
listen.
It's true.
No.
Also, tonight on our recruiting, we'll have a story on the latest defensive lineman out in California to get that Clemson offer. So have a great night, everybody. It's been a ton of fun.
Be pleasant today.
And we will have fun tomorrow. Tomorrow will be an SC Wild night as well here on Sports Talk. We'll see you then.